I was the forgotten child my whole life. Now my family wants me back. Why I finally said no. I've always been the one my family seemed to overlook, the invisible one. But now, after all these years, they want me back in their lives. The decision I make next could completely change the course of my life and theirs. I'm 42 now, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the unnoticed child in a family of 6 kids. I don't even know how to process my parents' sudden interest in reconnecting. There's a big age gap between me and my siblings. I'm the youngest by far, which always made me feel a little out of place. Growing up, I often felt like I was living in some strange, alternate reality. I was just there. The quiet one. The one who stayed out of trouble. The one no one really paid attention to. While my siblings shuffled in and out of hospitals and therapy appointments, I faded into the background. One of my earliest memories is coming home from school to find the house completely empty. No one checked if I had homework. No one asked about my day. And forget dinner, most of the time, they didn't even realize I needed to eat. So, by necessity, I learned how to cook for myself pretty young. I remember feeling heartbroken when my parents forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. It wasn't that they were terrible people or anything, they were just overwhelmed. They had so much going on with my siblings' health issues that I guess they thought I didn't need any extra attention. I was the normal one, the healthy one, the one they didn't have to worry about. But let me tell you, being the so-called normal one in a chaotic family isn't all it's cracked up to be. My oldest brother, Tom, is 52 now, but even as a kid, he spent a lot of time in hospitals dealing with a serious chronic illness. He still struggles with his health and relies on our parents for support. My sister, Sarah, who's 50, has been in and out of therapy her whole life and takes medication to manage her anxiety and depression. Then there are the twins, Lisa and Luke, who are 48. They needed special education and ongoing care because of their learning disabilities. And then there was me, Ben, the last one, the afterthought, the kid who was supposed to just get it, to be self-reliant, to manage on his own. Out of sheer necessity, I became fiercely independent. By high school, I figured out that my grades were my ticket out of that house. So I worked hard, not because anyone pushed me, but because I wanted out. I joined every club and team I could, not for the accolades, but for an excuse to be anywhere but home. I'll never forget one moment from my junior year. I'd made it to the state finals for debate, which was a huge deal for me. I'd worked so hard, stayed up late practicing and poured my heart into it. I'd mentioned the event to my parents a bunch of times in the weeks leading up to it. But on the morning of the finals, as I walked downstairs in my best outfit, my mom barely glanced up from a pile of medical bills. "Oh, are you going somewhere?" she asked, distracted. I tried to keep my voice steady as I reminded her, "Yeah, it's the state debate finals. I told you about it." "Oh, right," she said, but it was clear she didn't really remember. "Well, good luck. We've got to take your brother to his doctor's appointment, so your dad and I can't make it." I swallowed my disappointment and nodded. Of course, my brother's health came first, it always did. I went to the finals alone, competed my heart out, and took second place. When I got home that evening, no one asked how it went. The certificate I earned stayed buried on my desk for weeks, out of sight, like it didn't matter. College was my escape. I chose a school as far away from home as possible, and for the first time, I felt like I could finally breathe. I made friends who actually remembered my birthday, who cared about what I had to say, who saw me. 2 of them, Mike and Carly, became the family I never had. After graduation, Mike, Carly, and I decided to start fresh in a new state, far from all our families. Carly and I even moved in together, and little by little, I built a life that felt like mine. I threw myself into my career and worked my way up. Now, at 42, I'm doing well for myself. I'm a senior marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company, managing a talented team. Ironically, I've become an expert at grabbing attention and making things stand out, probably because I grew up feeling invisible. Work keeps me busy, but I love it. It gives me a sense of purpose and validation I never had as a kid. People listen to me. They value my input. And that never gets old. Outside of work, my life is pretty solid. I've got a tight circle of friends, a cozy condo with a killer view of the city, and I travel whenever I get the chance. Mike and Carly are still my rocks, and I've built other meaningful friendships along the way. We host movie nights, game days, and brunches that remind me of the kind of family gatherings I always wished for. But I'm not going to lie, those feelings of abandonment and invisibility? They didn't magically disappear. I've been working through them in therapy for years, trying to untangle the knots they left behind. Working through my past has been a slow and sometimes painful process, but it's taught me so much about myself. I've learned to set boundaries, respect my own needs, and stop seeking approval from people who just can't give it. For the past 20 years, my interactions with my family have been minimal: an occasional visit every few years, a handful of holiday phone calls, and nothing more. To protect myself from the hurt of their indifference, I kept my distance. I didn't cut them off completely, but I didn't let them get too close either. And then, last week, out of nowhere, my mom called. We hadn't spoken in over a year, and our last exchange was the usual awkward small talk. Honestly, I almost let the call go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Before I could even say hello, she said, "We want you to come home for Thanksgiving." Her voice sounded older, more tired than I remembered. "Your father and I miss you," she added. It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. Miss me? Where was this when I was growing up? Where was this when they skipped my college graduation or when I was out there building a life on my own? For 20 years, they barely noticed me. I stumbled over my words. I don't know. Work's really busy right now, and I already have plans with my friends. She sighed, her voice slipping into that familiar tone of guilt I remembered all too well. Your family is us. If you need to change your plans, I'm sure your friends will understand. Family. That word felt so empty coming from her. What did family even mean after a lifetime of feeling like an afterthought? She kept going, as though I hadn't just hesitated. Your siblings will all be here. It would mean so much to have everyone together again. I felt resentment rise in my chest. Everyone back together? I thought bitterly. When had we ever been together? I couldn't remember a single family meal where someone wasn't in the middle of a crisis, heading to therapy, or on their way to the hospital. I finally said, "I'll think about it," just to end the conversation. But the truth was, as soon as I hung up, I knew I wasn't going. The thought of sitting around a table, pretending to be a happy, normal family, made me feel physically sick. Now, a week later, I'm still torn. There's a small, hopeful part of me, the part that's still that little kid whispering, maybe this time is different. Maybe they've finally noticed you. Maybe they want to make things right. But the more rational, adult side of me knows better. They didn't call because they've suddenly realized how much they've ignored me. They called because they're getting older, my siblings are still struggling, and I'm the only one with my life together. I'm not their daughter, I'm their backup plan. Still, I can't stop going back and forth. What if I'm wrong? What if this really is a genuine attempt to reconnect? Am I being unforgiving, or am I finally standing up for myself and maintaining healthy boundaries? Since that call, memories I thought I'd dealt with have started bubbling to the surface. The other night, I had a dream I was back in my childhood bedroom, screaming at the top of my lungs, but no one could hear me. I woke up in a cold sweat, feeling like that lonely, invisible kid all over again. It's even affecting my work. Yesterday, I nodded off during an important meeting because I couldn't stop thinking about my family the night before. My team noticed, too, throwing me concerned glances, which is rare because I'm usually the one who's calm, focused, and steady under pressure. When I talked it over with Mike and Carly, they both said I shouldn't go. They've seen firsthand how much damage my family has done and how long it's taken me to heal. Mike was blunt about it. You don't owe them anything. Don't let them drag you back into their mess. You've built an incredible life for yourself. Carly, as always, was gentler. Remember how long it took you to stop flinching whenever your phone rang, she reminded me. How many panic attacks did you have when you first started setting boundaries? Is it really worth risking all that progress? They're right. I know they are. But that little voice inside me, the one that just wanted her parents to notice and love her, hasn't gone away. She's whispering, maybe this time will be different. Maybe they'll finally be the family you always wanted. Mike and Carly also reminded me that I have a choice in this, and no matter what I decide, they'll support me. I'm grateful for that, but it doesn't make the decision any easier. So here I am, turning to strangers online for advice. Is it wrong of me to want to go? Is it selfish to prioritize my mental health over a family reunion? Or am I finally doing what's best for myself after a lifetime of being ignored? Thanksgiving is still months away, but it's all I can think about. I can't focus at work, I can't sleep, and every time my phone rings, my heart races, wondering if it's them calling again. Part of me wants to block their numbers, cut ties completely, and move on with my life. But another part feels guilty for even thinking that. Because no matter what, they're still my parents, even if they weren't particularly good at being parents. I don't know what to do. I feel stuck between the capable, independent adult I've worked so hard to become and the lonely, invisible kid I used to be. I don't know how to face my family without slipping back into that abandoned, frightened version of myself. What should I do? Should I risk reopening old wounds by going to Thanksgiving, or should I stay away and possibly lose any chance of reconciliation? How do you handle it when your parents suddenly decide they want you back in their lives after decades of silence? I need help and outside perspective, because I feel like I'm drowning in this uncertainty. Update: it's been about 2 weeks since my last post, and instead of getting any clearer, things have only gotten messier. A lot has happened, and honestly, I'm reeling. First, my older brother, Jake, called me out of the blue. We haven't had a real conversation in years, so seeing his name pop up on my phone caught me off guard. For a second, I thought something terrible must have happened. His voice sounded older, more strained than I remembered. "Hey, sis," he said, "you got a minute? We need to talk about something serious." That opening gave me chills. His tone made it clear he wasn't just calling to catch up. He got straight to the point. "Mom and Dad have been talking," he started, not even waiting for me to respond. "As they get older, they're worried about what'll happen when they're gone, who'll take care of things." A sinking feeling hit me. I didn't know what he was about to say, but I could sense where it was headed. "When they can't take care of one of the boys anymore," Jake continued, "they want you to be their legal guardian." I froze. The boys are our brothers, both of whom have significant health issues. I could barely process what he was saying. It felt like someone punched me in the gut. "Me?" I choked out. "Why me? Why now?" Jake sighed, and I could tell he felt bad delivering the message. "Look," he said, "I know it's a lot to ask. But you're the only one who's stable. Everyone else has their own problems. You've got your life together. They think you're the best option." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. After years of being ignored, of feeling like an afterthought, I was suddenly being handed this enormous responsibility. It felt like a cruel joke. Did they even think to ask me about this? I snapped, my voice trembling with anger and disbelief. Or were they just planning to drop this on me at Thanksgiving? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Jake said, They were hoping to discuss it in person. I just thought you should know ahead of time. Give you time to think about it." "Think about it?" I repeated, barely able to keep my voice steady. How am I supposed to think about taking on something like this? I have my own life, my own plans. Jake sounded apologetic. "I know it's a lot," he said. "But they're desperate. They need to know someone will be there for the boys when they can't be." When the call ended, I just sat there in silence, stunned. The absurdity of it all was overwhelming. After ignoring me for most of my life, they now wanted me to step in and take care of everything. And as if that wasn't enough, a few days later, I got a letter from my mom. It was long, rambling, and filled with the same guilt-tripping language I remember from my childhood. She wrote about how hard things have been for them, how much they've sacrificed for the family, and how they needed me now more than ever. But the part that hit me the hardest came near the end. "Sweetheart, We're not asking for much. All we need is to know that someone will take care of the family when we're gone. You're our only hope. I read that line over and over. Their only hope? How many times had I needed them when I was growing up? How many times had I felt invisible and unwanted? Where was their hope for me back then? Since getting that letter, I've been a wreck. I can't focus at work, I can't sleep, and my coworkers have started noticing. Meetings have had to be rescheduled because my mind keeps drifting back to this whole mess. I hate that they still have this kind of power over me, and I hate that I'm letting them get to me. Last night, I invited Mike and Carly over for wine and venting. They were both furious on my behalf. They can't do this to you, Mike said, his voice full of anger. They ignored you for decades, and now they want to use you as a safety net? That's not fair. Carly, as always, was more measured. You need to think about what's best for you, she said gently. Not what they want, or what they think is best for them. What do you want? That question has been haunting me ever since. What do I want? It sounds simple, but I don't have an answer. Part of me, the little girl who always wanted her parents' approval, wants to say yes. Wants to be the good daughter they never saw me as. But the adult in me, the one who has worked so hard to build a life and an identity outside of my family's shadow, is screaming no. I've spent so much of my life trying to prove my worth to them, trying to be noticed, trying to be appreciated. And now that I've finally built a life where I'm valued and respected, they want me to give it all up. They want me to drop everything and clean up the mess they made. The more I think about it, the angrier I get. They're not asking me to be part of the family. They're asking me to be their caretaker, their backup plan. They don't want a daughter, they want a solution. I've made my decision. After hours of long talks with Mike and Carly, I've decided that I will not attend Thanksgiving, and I will not take on the role of guardian for my siblings. I won't let them drag me back into the dysfunction I worked so hard to escape. I know this won't be easy. I'm fully prepared for the guilt trips and emotional manipulation. But I also know I deserve better. I've built a life for myself, a life that doesn't revolve around their neglect and demands. I deserve to live that life without constantly being pulled back into their chaos. Tomorrow, I'll call Jake and tell him my decision. Afterward, I'll send a letter to my parents explaining why I won't be at Thanksgiving and why I can't be their chosen caregiver. Even though I know this is the right thing to do, it's terrifying. It's heartbreaking. And yet, at the same time, I feel a small sense of pride for finally standing up for myself, for putting my well-being ahead of their expectations. I still wish things could be different, but this is the choice I need to make for my own sanity. To everyone who supported me during this time, thank you. Your kind words and advice have been a lifeline. After a lifetime of feeling invisible, it's overwhelming, in the best way, to feel seen and understood. Once I've spoken to my family, I'll update again. Wish me luck, I think I'm going to need it. Update: it's been about a month since my last post, but it feels like years. Everything has escalated in ways I never saw coming, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. First off, thank you to everyone who commented on my previous post. Your advice gave me the courage I needed to stand my ground. I turned down the guardianship, and I skipped Thanksgiving, just like I said I would. I called Jake to tell him my decision. He was surprisingly understanding, though I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Afterward, I wrote a letter to my parents, explaining my reasons. For a while, I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Last week, I came home from work to find my 70-year-old mother waiting at my front door. My mother. The woman who had never visited me, not when I got my first apartment, not when I bought my condo, not when I got my big promotion. And now, there she was, standing on my doorstep like she had every right to be there. I almost dropped my keys. Mom? I whispered, barely able to speak. What are you doing here? She didn't answer right away. She just stared at me, her eyes searching my face like she was seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. When she finally spoke, her tone was a strange mix of forceful and pleading. We need to talk, she said. It's not good for your father, the doctors. Her voice cracked, and tears filled her eyes. For a moment, guilt crept in. I hadn't known Dad was sick. Then, just as quickly, I reminded myself why I didn't know, because they never tell me anything unless they want something from me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, keeping my voice as neutral as I could. But I don't see what that has to do with me. Her eyes widened, as if I'd slapped her. He's your father, she said, her voice rising. How can you say that? Venom laced my words before I could stop it. When has he ever acted like a father to me? She stepped closer, like she might try to come inside. I stayed firm, blocking the doorway. I wasn't about to let her invade my space, the space I'd worked so hard to make my own. Please, she begged, her tone slipping into the guilt-laden plea I remembered all too well from my childhood. We need you. I can't handle this on my own. Your father's in and out of the hospital. Your siblings. My siblings? I cut her off. It's always about my siblings, isn't it, Mom? What about me? When have you ever needed me for me and not for what I could do for everyone else? She flinched, like my words had physically struck her. That's not fair, she said, her voice trembling. We've always loved you. We've always been there for you. I couldn't stop myself. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the hallway. There for me? Really? Were you there for me when you forgot my birthdays? When you missed my final debate? When you skipped my college graduation? Please, Mom, tell me exactly when you were there for me. Her face crumbled, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a strange, grim satisfaction. For once, she was feeling even a fraction of the pain I'd carried for years. We did the best we could, she said finally, her voice breaking. You don't know what it was like, trying to keep everyone alive and well. There was no time for me, I finished for her. You didn't have time for me because I wasn't sick. Because I wasn't causing problems. Because I was invisible. The weight of decades of unsaid hurt hung between us as we stood there in silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry. For a fleeting moment, I thought my mom meant it. That she was finally being honest. That's not how we meant to make you feel, she continued, her voice trembling. You are loved. You matter to us. Please, come home. Help us. I felt a sting in my eyes, tears threatening to fall, but I blinked them away. My family had already caused me enough tears. I wouldn't give them more. I can't, I said firmly, holding my ground. I won't, Mom. I've built a life of my own, a life I created without you. I'm not going to sacrifice that to be your backup plan. Backup plan, she repeated, her voice rising. Is that what you think this is? We're your family. No, I replied, my voice steady and certain, even surprising myself. You were my family. Not anymore. I've chosen my family, the people who have been there for me. My friends, who've stood by me, who've seen me when you couldn't be bothered to look. Her face crumpled into a mix of disbelief and pain. So that's it? You're just going to turn your back on us? I shook my head. No, Mom. You turned your back on me a long time ago. I'm just finally walking away. She stared at me, her shoulders slumping under the weight of my words. Without another reply, she turned and walked away, her steps slow and resigned. I stood there, watching her go, feeling both relief and sadness. It felt like the end of something, like the last flicker of hope had finally burned out. Hope that one day, my parents would see me, love me in the way I had always needed. But it was over now. And it had to be. I thought that was the end of it. I believed I had drawn my line clearly enough. But, as usual, life had other plans. A week after my mom's visit, my brother called. His voice was heavy as he spoke. Dad passed away, he said. I sat there, staring at the phone, unsure of what to feel. Guilt? Sadness? Relief? The news felt distant, like he was talking about a stranger and not the man who was supposed to be my father. Numbness settled in. The funeral is next week, Jake continued after a pause. Will you come? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath before answering. No. I don't think I will. The line went silent for a long moment. Then Jake's voice came back, soft and surprisingly understanding. I get it, he said. Take care of yourself, sis. His words left me stunned. No judgment, no guilt trip. Just understanding. After hanging up, I sat there for a long time, reflecting on the man who had been my father in name but not in practice. I thought about all the times I had yearned for his attention, his approval, his love. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had spent so much of my life chasing something that was never going to come. And in doing so, I had neglected myself. But now, I could finally let it go. I looked around at the life I had built for myself, a career I loved, friends who cared for me, and a sense of self-worth that wasn't tied to anyone else's validation. I had found my peace. My father's death felt like the closing of a long, painful chapter, a story filled with missed opportunities and unspoken words. But it was over. And I couldn't change it. All I could do was move forward. I decided not to attend the funeral. I wouldn't be reaching out to my mom or my siblings, either. Not out of anger or bitterness, but because I had outgrown that world. I no longer belonged there. To anyone who might judge me for this decision, let me be clear, it's not about forgiveness. I'm not holding on to resentment. I've simply realized that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away. Some relationships are too broken to fix. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not sad, either. I'm just free. Free from unmet expectations. Free from the pain of being overlooked and undervalued. Free to live my life without the heavy shadow of my family hanging over me. I want to thank everyone who has followed my story and supported me through one of the most difficult times in my life. Your kindness and encouragement gave me strength when I needed it most. This will be my final update. From now on, my focus is on my future, a future I can shape, free from the weight of my past. It's a little scary, sure, but it's also exhilarating. If you're reading this and find yourself in a similar situation, feeling trapped by family expectations or overlooked by the people who are supposed to love you, please know this: it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to walk away if staying hurts you more than leaving does. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be loved and valued for who you are. Thank you all, one last time, for being the supportive and compassionate people I never had growing up. You'll never know just how much that has meant to me.